Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Shall we start the session now?
Yes, sir.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, sir.
ठीक है. Whether the presentation is visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Today we shall discuss some frameworks of J2EE. Actually, a framework is a software platform that helps in developing web applications. As we know, all web applications run over internet. The application may have many clients. It is having a central server. Clients can access the server for any type of services, for the services for which the web application is meant for. So basically, web application works over client server architecture. We client sends request to the server. The server receives the request. Requests are processed at the server side. During processing, if required, the server accesses the database which is at the back end. After processing of requests, responses are generated. Responses are sent back to the client. This is the fundamental mechanism on the basis of which web application works. So framework is a software platform that is readily available to you. It helps you in developing web applications. J2EE framework supports the coding pattern of Java language. So it is enterprise edition, EE. All enterprise applications can be developed. So there are many platforms. Each differs from other in some way or other. In this presentation, we shall discuss what are the main frameworks available, J2EE frameworks, and how they differ from each other. So J2EE frameworks include Spring MVC, Spring Boot, Struts, Hibernate, etc. So in this presentation, we shall discuss what are the purpose of these frameworks, how they differ from each other, and what is the architectural specifications on the basis of which the framework works. So first we shall discuss Strut. So Struts is a framework. The framework is based on MVC principle. In the last session, we had discussed MVC. MVC is model view control. So Struts is a readily available framework that allows us to develop MVC based web applications. Basically, our web application must have three components at least. MVC. M is model, that represents what database model we are implementing. So model is implemented at the back end. View. View is at the front end. What technology we are using for presentations of information to the client. That part is dealt with by view. There are many technology. Out of the many, what we are using to deal with this part. So view deals with this. View is at the front end, model is at the back end, and controller sits in between model and view. Controller contains actually the programming logic, the code logic on the basis of which requests are processed. Multiple requests may come from the client. All requests are processes and controller is responsible for this job. Broadly, these are the three components of MVC. So Struts is a framework that allow us to develop our web application as per the principles laid down in MVC. So there are many features of Struts. Some of the important features are it supports POJO. POJO matlab plain old Java objects. As the framework is Java framework, so programming paradigm of Java is used. Java is object-oriented programming language. So everything is dealt with by objects. So Struts framework supports POJO. And another important thing is it supports configurable MVC components. All the three components, model, view, and control, they are configurable. That means they can be configured as per the requirement. Then it also allows the use of other frameworks in an integrated way. This is Struts. During the use of Struts, if the developer needs, the developer can use other frameworks like Spring, Hibernate, etc. We shall discuss what are the functionalities of Spring, what are the functionalities of Hibernate, that we shall discuss in today's session. But Struts can integrate itself with Spring, Hibernate, etc. It also extends Ajax support. You must be knowing Ajax matlab asynchronous, JavaScript and XML. This is a combined technology. JavaScript is used for validation purposes. JavaScript is used for putting dynamism into the web application. JavaScript makes the web application interactive. One can interact with the web application that is possible through JavaScript. So that support is given, is provided by Struts to validation support. Then as far as view is concerned, many templates are available for presentation of data. Many ready-made templates are available. We can choose any of the templates to put our data into it so that it can be displayed in a presentable manner. So for that purpose, free marker, velocity, JSP, etc. These are the technology for view. So by and large, STROTS is an integrated framework. It is available with many tools which can be used for the purpose of developing the model, the controller and view component of our web application. There are two architectural specifications. This is one architectural specifications that is not on the requirements of MVC, but this one is as per the requirement of MVC. Actually, STROTS based on this architecture, Model 2 architecture that supports MVC. As the diagram, architectural diagram indicates, there is a clear separation between MVC. So three distinct segments are integrated and well coordinated with each other. View part, that is dealt with by JSP. JSP is Java server page. JSP is a technology. As the name indicates, it is used for the purpose of developing server pages. Server pages matlab programming logic that is executed by the server. So it is written in Java language. So that is executed by the server to generate the view. So for developing the view part, JSP technology is used. Model, as I told you, model represents the database. During the processing, the web application may need to establish connectivity with the database. Database is at the back end. So our web application establishes connectivity with the database as and when required. So for establishing connectivity with the database, we need a code. That code is Java Bean. So Java Bean is a software component. So Java Beans can be designed for many purposes. In this particular diagram, in this architectural diagram, Java Bean is a software component that has been developed, that has been used for the purpose of establishing connectivity with the database. So that is model. Once connectivity is established, we can perform four basic operations with the database. Four basic operations are called as CRUD operations, CRUD. We shall discuss. C for create, R for read, U for update, D for delete. These four basic operations can be performed using database. But before performing these operations, there must be connectivity. So that connectivity is established by Java Bean. So JSP technology is used for the purpose of developing the view. Java Bean is used for the purpose of establishing connectivity and accessing the database, performing CRUD operations. Then controller. Controller is the main programming logic on the basis of which requests are processed. As the diagram indicates, the requests comes from outside agency, clients. Symbolically, it is demonstrated in this diagram. This is a client. Symbolically, this is a client. The monitor screen represents a client. The client sends request. The controller receives the request. It processes the request. For request processing, programming logic is necessary. That programming logic is developed through a servlet. The servlet represents the program code that processes the client's request. So these are the three components. Controller processes the client's request, generates the response. That is done through servlet. Servlet is a Java program specifically designed for handling requests and generating responses. Then responses are presented through view. So in this framework, view is developed through JSP. JSP is another technology. So servlet is a technology, JSP is a technology. Here both the technologies are used. Servlet is used for developing controller program. JSP is used for developing view program. And finally Java Beans. Java Beans software components, they are used to establish link between our web application and the database. So broadly, this is the architecture, MVC based architecture that is implemented in Struts framework. So whatever we want to do using Struts framework is available, freely available, that can be loaded into our computer. We can work with the Struts framework, but keeping in mind these basic principles of this framework. Then Spring MVC. We shall discuss Spring MVC in detail. There are many J2EE frameworks. Struts is one, Spring MVC, Spring Boot, Hibernate. These are all many frameworks. Like Struts, Spring MVC in another framework. In the second presentation, we shall discuss in detail about Spring MVC. In this slide, some of the features of Spring MVC is displayed. In Spring MVC, there is a clear separation of responsibility. There are many components of Spring MVC. Dispatcher servlet, controller, handler mapping, view resolver, model object, command object, validation segment. These are all different components of Spring MVC. Dispatcher servlet. This is a servlet program. For example, the dispatcher servlets, this is not the major servlet that is a part of the controller. As I told you, servlet is a Java program that can be designed for many purposes. And dispatcher servlet may be designed for the purpose of dispatching requests. When requests come from the client, it is received by the dispatcher servlet. And dispatcher servlet decides what for the request is. Accordingly, it dispatches the request to the respective component of the web application. So that's why the name is dispatcher servlet. It dispatches the request to the respective web components of our web application. Suppose the request is meant for certain information and those information are generally they lie in the database. So when the request comes from the client for certain information, so that request is directed to the database for processing because information are kept into the database. They are collected from they need to be collected from the database. So accordingly, the request is dispatched to that particular component of the web application that deals with the database access. So requests varies. So as per the requirements of the request, the dispatcher servlet dispatches the request to the respective component of our web application. Similarly, controller. We shall discuss Spring MVC in the second presentation. There is a detailed architecture diagram, how these components work with each other. Dispatcher servlet, controller, handler mapping, view resolver. These are all various components of the Spring MVC architecture, and all components are there is a clear separation among all the components. Second feature is adaptability and flexibility. This framework is very much flexible. Flexibility in the sense that it defines different methods for performing different operations. As you know, in a Java application, the methods represents the behavior of the application. One method is defined for performing one operation. Another method is defined for the purpose of performing another operation. So in a application, there may be many methods. So flexibility is dealt with by various methods. It is the ability of the web application to adapt the functionalities across various situations. Suppose the web application is handled in a mobile screen and somebody handles the web application is a computer screen. So screen size differs. The size of the mobile screen and the size of the computer screen, they differ from each other. But the web application is designed in such a way that they can be comfortably used in mobile screen as well as in computer screen. It is so much flexible and adaptable So it fits the ability of a web application to adapt its layout, its functionality across various screen sizes. So that is adaptability and flexibility. Similarly, reusable business code. Once a method is designed, as and when required, it can be called, it can be invoked for execution. So designing is made only once. Once the function, the method is designed, but it can be called again and again for execution. That is what executability, that is what reusability is. So as far as MVC is concerned, these are the features of Spring MVC framework. This is also a framework. Like Struts, this is also a framework. We are having its architectural diagram. We shall discuss the details of its functionality while we will deal with the architectural diagram. Spring Boot is another framework. Spring Boot is another framework. The difference between Boot and MVC is a lot of configuration is required in MVC, Spring MVC. But Spring Boot works, the basic guiding principle is, as it is written in the first point, the basic guiding principle is convention over configuration. Spring MVC needs a lot of configuration, whereas Spring Boot doesn't need many configurations. There are some starters used in Spring Boot. What are the starters? The starters are ready-made programming components that deals with many things. So as they are available, readily available, so configuration is overpassed, bypassed. So with less configuration, we can use Spring Boot framework with available starters. So auto configuration is allowed in Spring Boot. The application, the framework provides auto configuration facilities. Another advantage of using Spring Boot is the framework is embedded with servers. We need not have to take the support of outside servers. The framework itself is embedded with servers like Tomcat. Apache Tomcat is a main primary Java server. This framework, Spring Boot, is available with Tomcat. Inbuilt in this framework. So it supports embedded servers. Similarly, another framework is Hibernate. Hibernate is not a general purpose framework. Spring is a general purpose framework. Web applications having multiple purposes can be developed using Spring framework, whether it is Boot or it is MVC. So Spring is a general purpose framework. Hibernate is a specific purpose framework. The difference between Hibernate and Spring. Basically, Hibernate is a ORM framework. ORM matlab object relational mapping. ORM is object relational mapping. In the next presentation, we shall discuss how this mapping takes place. As the name indicates, object relational mapping. Object and relational both are mapped together. That part is dealt with by Hibernate. Our Java code uses objects. In a Java code, everything is represented through an object. Relational matlab the database, the relational database. The relational database carries data in tabular form, not in object form. So data that are stored into the database are not in object form. But our program uses data which must be in object form. So there is a mismatch. Actual data is not in object form. Relational database keeps data which are in tabular form. They are not in the form of objects. But our program deals with the data in object form. So at the one side, program which deals with the data in object notation, data which are stored into the database, that is in non-object notation. So there is a mismatch. That is the reason why mapping is necessary. So that compatibility is maintained when data are fetched from the database, they must be represented through objects. So that part, that is dealt with by Hibernate. So Hibernate is a object relational mapping framework, ORM framework. It maps POJOs to relational database tables. POJO matlab Java objects, plain old Java objects. So these are the some of the features of Hibernate is given here.
Excuse
It
me,
is
sir.
open source. The
Sir, can you?
performance is very high. That's why all web applications, basically all framework, whether it is Spring, it is Struts, whatever the framework may be, all J2EE frameworks uses this ORM model for the purpose of mapping. So performance is high. It is a open source framework. This framework is database independent. Whatever database you may use. For all sorts of databases, the framework works. Then there is scalability, there is lazy loading. All these features are available. And there is
Excuse me,
a
sir.
language that is HQL. You must be knowing the query language, SQL. SQL is the common query language, structured query language. This framework is available with HQL. Framework itself is available with HQL. Using this language, we can deal with the database. We can put data into the database. We can retrieve data from the database. We can update data in the database. We can remove data from the database. All the operations, all possible operations that can be done using SQL language, and that is available in this particular framework, Hibernate framework. So Struts is a framework, Spring is a framework. Spring framework is having two versions. One is Spring Boot, another is Spring MVC. Hibernate is a framework. So these are all various frameworks available. Now these three tables gives you a comparative statement between various frameworks. First table draws the comparison between Struts and Spring. Second, Spring Boot and Spring MVC. Third, Spring and Hibernate. So as I told you, Spring is a general purpose framework to develop enterprise Java applications, web applications. Spring is a general purpose framework meant for developing enterprise Java applications. Whereas Hibernate is a specific, special purpose. The purpose is ORM, object relational mapping. This is a ORM framework specialized in database mapping. Spring framework has many variations. Spring Boot, Spring MVC, Spring REST, Spring Security. These are the variations available with Spring framework. But Hibernate doesn't have any. The purpose is fixed. That is object relational persistence. And Spring framework supports for connection pooling by changing the configuration. Few minutes back, we were discussing the Spring MVC needs a lot of configuration, whereas Spring Boot needs less configuration. Auto configuration is allowed. So when configuration changes is required, so there is a process called pooling that happens in Spring. Whereas Hibernate framework uses two levels of cache. So two levels of cache ensures higher performance, better performance. In the architectural diagram of Hibernate, we shall discuss in the coming, in the next presentation, how two levels of cache is used in Hibernate framework. And due to two levels of cache, performance is enhanced. That is the major benefit of Hibernate. That facility is not there with Spring. So basic difference between Spring and Hibernate is Spring is J2EE framework, generally used for development of any enterprise Java applications, web applications. And Hibernate is a specifically, this is a ORM framework meant for the purpose of mapping. Then this table gives comparison between two variations of Spring Boot and Spring MVC. Just now, we are discussing Spring MVC requires a lot of configuration. As it requires a lot of configuration, so there is a lot of boilerplate code. So boilerplate code matlab Spring Boot removes all boilerplate code because it supports auto configuration. Spring MVC needs a lot of configuration, and that is done through a lot of boilerplate code. The boilerplate code refers to the sections of code that must be included in many places. That code is used in many places. As and when a configuration is required, the code is necessary. So a sections of code that must be included in many places with some or other alterations. So the thing is, Spring Boot doesn't need any additional code because it supports auto configuration. Spring MVC needs additional codes that has to be used again and again as and when configuration is necessary. That is the thing. Another difference is, there is a concept which is known as a dependency injection. This is a very important programming concept. Whether you know it or not, that I do not know. I assume that you must be knowing. There are two concepts, programming concepts. One is IOC. IOC is inversion of control. And dependency injection is a subset of inversion of control, IOC. IOC is a principle. That principle is implemented through dependency injection. So dependency injection is a IOC principle. In Spring MVC, that is a very tough process. Dependency injection is a tough process. Whereas Spring Boot, it provides many starters. And starters, ready-made starters, readily available starters. Starter is a programming component that is available in Spring Boot that does the dependency injection for us. We need not have to perform it through code. So in MVC, dependency injection is performed through code. The developer has to write the code for dependency injection. But in Boot, readily available components are there, so no separate code is necessary. Therefore, Spring Boot makes the development process easier. Many things are available. We can use them. Simply, we can use them as and when it is required. But in Spring MVC, lot of configuration and dependency management, everything has to be done. So development process is slow. Another thing is Tomcat is a server that is integrated with, that is embedded with Spring Boot framework. But this is not the case with MVC. In Boot, embedded server is available, but in MVC that is not the case. So due to these functional differences, so Spring MVC and Spring Boot, among Spring MVC and Spring Boot, so some advantages, some more benefits are added with Spring Boot. Otherwise, both the frameworks, whether it is Boot or MVC, they can be used for the purpose of developing web applications.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, there was a term called persistent object in the previous slide, sir. What is that one, sir? Can you please?
Which one? Which one?
Actually, in the slide of hibernate,
Acha,
spring
Hibernate.
hibernate, we had
Hibernate.
it is a object ORM mapping and persistent framework. So it said it
Persistent.
matches persistent object. We understood what is ORM. Can you explain what is persistent framework, sir? What is the difference?
Mhm. This slide, na? Persistence frameworks. Okay.
Yes.
The persistence meaning the continuity, the farm continuation. The farm continuation of an action, that is persistence. ORM is a persistence framework. Hibernate is a persistence framework. That means when mapping takes place between object at one side and relational data at the other side, they are represented through objects. In the application, all data are represented through objects. To ensure persistency in the sense permanent, to ensure persistency, two levels of cache are used in this framework. First level and second level. We shall discuss how two levels of cache are implemented. But simple thing is, persistence framework is a software layer that maps object-oriented application data to relational database, automating the storage, retrieval, and management of data. So, permanent storage is ensured by two levels of cache. Persistence means, in simpler term, it is permanent. The usage of Hibernate as a persistence framework enables the developer to concentrate more on business logic instead of making efforts on SQL and writing boilerplate code. What does this line indicate? No need for writing boilerplate code. Ready-made code is available in SQL format. Using SQL, we can frame queries to retrieve data, to access the database. Once data are accessed from the database, they are passed through two levels of cache. Cache means storage. These two levels of cache ensures persistency. That's why it is a persistence framework. We shall discuss in detail while we will discuss the architecture. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Persistency means permanent. So whatever the framework may be, in this particular presentation, we discussed about some of the frameworks. Among these frameworks, Sprint is a general purpose framework and Hibernate is a ORM framework. Now, we shall discuss the architecture of Sprint's MVC. The architecture of Sprint MVC. As I told you, Sprint MVC is a open source Java framework. The name indicates that it supports model view controller design pattern. The basic features of dependency injunction and inversion of control that is implemented in Sprint framework through codes. The dispatcher servlet acts as the glue. That means it resolves the request. The dispatcher servlet receives the request and resolves the request, sends the request to the appropriate component of the web application. See, the major component is dispatcher servlet. This is the Sprint framework. The core component, then web component, the data component. The core component is having bins, core of the web application, then context and expression language. Then web component is having WebSocket, servlet, portlet, etc. Data component is having ORM part, JDBC part, JMS, etc. And basically, this framework supports aspect-oriented programming, AOP. This is a programming paradigm designed to modularize the web application. And in aspect-oriented programming, login, security, transaction managements, all these things are handled by different aspects. Login is an aspect, security to ensuring security is another aspect, transaction management is third aspect. So all these aspects are dealt with by different classes. So aspect oriented programming deals with different aspects using multiple classes. Therefore, AOP ensures code readability and maintainability. Implementation of AOP ensures easy readability. One can one can go through the code easily. Also maintainability. For regular maintenance, it helps in easy maintenance. So this framework supports AOP, aspect oriented programming. So basically, the framework is consisting of these components. So this framework is described here, the core container. First one is core container, then data access layer, then web layer. These are the three major portions of the framework: core container, data access layer, and web layer. Core container handles IOC and DI. Inversion of control and DI, dependency injunction. Inversion of control is a principle. DI implements that principle. Through DI, dependency injection, IOC is implemented. So IOC, inversion of control, is a principle in which the web application delegates control it delegates control of maybe the control of application flow, object creation, etc. to another framework. Let me give a simple example. You might have written Java programs. In a Java program, constructor plays a vital role. What happens when constructors are used in a program? Constructors helps in object creation. The name is constructor because it helps in constructing the object. When object is created, we supply external data to the constructor. Those external data are known as parameters. We supply parameter values to the constructor so that the object can be created using those parameter values. So that is what dependency injection is. We inject the dependency. By supplying the parameter values, we are injecting. So that principle is dependency injection. Suppose a car. Car is a class. In a web application, car is a class. That class is used to create many objects, real life car objects, real world car objects. If you want to create a car object with electric engine, then you have to inject to the constructor the information related to electric engine so that that object will be created. If you want to create a car with petrol engine, you have to inject the information related to a petrol engine to its constructor so that a car with petrol engine will be created. So that is dependency injection. The objects depends on what information that has to be supplied through constructor. That is injection, dependency injection. So this framework, Spring framework, supports dependency injection. Then bin factory, as I told you, bin is a Java bin is a software components. Many bins may be used in a program, in a web application. Many bins may be used. So bin factory comes under this module. Java bins are reusable software components. Once the software component is used, it can be used for multiple times. Suppose one software component is designed, that is included in our web application, for making connectivity with the database. So as and when we need connectivity, simply we invoke the Java bin. So that gets activated and that establishes connectivity with the database. So it is a reusable software component that can be used again and again as and when situation arises. So Java bin is a class. As it is a Java program, it is a class that encapsulates many things. So that for multiple purposes, multiple Java bins can be used. So this framework, Spring framework, supports a bin factory. Bin factory matlab, the designing pattern in the first session, try to recollect. A design pattern is there, that is a factory design pattern. Factory design pattern is implemented through interfaces. Interface is a template. Template is generalized form, is in generalized form. We can derive real life objects from that interface. Multiple real life, real world objects can be derived from that interface. Interface is a template. So factory pattern is represented, is implemented through that principle. So Spring MVC framework uses the factory design pattern. Then a expression language is also used in this framework. That expression language is for querying and manipulation of object at runtime. So by and large, the core container contains the bean factory, expression language. It supports dependency injection by implementing the inversion of control principle, and it supports context management. As per the context, the framework works. So context module, core and beans module provide strong base to build the context module. So context setting, context management, it decides the application context. On what context, at what point of time, on what context the application is running. That is handled by the context module. So these are the functionalities of core container. Then data access layer. As the framework diagram shows, the data access layer contains JDBC, ORM, JMS, OXM, then transaction management. All transactions takes place, or all transactions are dealt with by this layer, data access layer. Transactions means the activity that are done, that are conducted using database. Using database, what activities are conducted? That is transaction. So JDBC, Java database connectivity. This is a technology. JDBC is a technology that is used to establish connectivity with the database. Web application needs connectivity with the database. Once connectivity is established, then transactions can take place. Otherwise, no transactions can happen. So first step is establishing connectivity to the database. Because our web application has no link with the database. Web application runs in the middle layer. Database is at the bottom layer. That is at the back end. There is no direct connectivity. So if web application needs data from the database, then first step is connectivity must be established. That part is dealt with by JDBC, Java database connectivity. This is a technology. How the connectivity is established, I think in our first session, there was a discussion on this, how connectivity is established using JDBC. Then ORM module. Few minutes back, we were discussing what is ORM module. Hibernate ensures this operation, object relational mapping. Similarly, XML mapping. You might be knowing what is XML, extensible markup language, that may be used for the purpose of data presentations of data. So using XML, data presentations can be made. So our web application must be mapped with the XML. So this layer is a part of the data access layer. So this is for JDBC is for establishing connectivity, ORM is for performing mapping, XML is for presentation of data, and message service, JMS. JMS is for producing and consuming messages. This module is meant for communication. Messages are generated and messages are received. Consuming and producing, generation of messages as well as receiving of messages. So JMS module handles all sorts of communications. So third important component is web layer. Actually, web layer is the controller. And web layer implements MVC pattern. WebSocket, see the diagram, WebSocket. WebSocket ensures communication. Then servlet handles the request, user's request. When requests coming from the client, first is dispatcher servlet. This is a type of servlet. This servlet is designed to receive the request. When request is coming from the client, it is the dispatcher servlet to receive the request and decides for what purpose the request is. Accordingly, it is resolved by the dispatcher servlet. Similarly, there may be other servlets. In a web application, there may be many servlets. And each servlet is designed for different purposes. For resolve of request, there may be one servlet. For processing of request, there may be another servlet. Dispatcher servlet resolves the request and dispatches the request to the respective component. The servlet meant for processing the request that deals with that portion only, that processes the request and generates the response. So, web socket deals with the communication part, servlet deals with the request part, portlet. Portlet is a pluggable component. Pluggable matlab, as and when required, it is plugged into the web application. Otherwise not. And basically it is a user interface. User interface is managed by portlet. Portlet manages the user interface. And using portlet, the dynamic web content can be generated and displayed in a web portal. That's why the name is portlet. Dynamic web content are generated and displayed in a web portal. So displaying in a web portal matlab displaying in the browser's screen. For displaying a content in the browser screen, we need HTML. So portlet is a pluggable component that deals with displaying information in the web portal. It manages that part. So portlets act as small interactive windowed applications. So servlet and portlet, the difference between servlet and portlet is servlet generates the response, but the response must be viewed. The response must be presented in a presentable manner. That part is done by that part is handled by the portlet. So WebSocket takes responsibility of communication that takes place between client and server. So socket is the communication link. Web portlet covers the MVC implementation to be used in a portlet setup, emulates the functionality of web servlet module. So responses are presented through portlets. Portlets deals with that part. So these are the components of web layer. So this framework is having three major components: core container, data access layer, and web layer. The framework is consisting of these three. Now this is the architectural diagram. The architecture on the basis of which the framework works. You just see the flow. The external segment of the architecture. This represents this represents the client. Client sending the request. The first arrow, topmost arrow. Incoming request, and dispatcher servlet receives the request. Requests coming from the client that is received by the dispatcher servlet. Handler mapping matlab the dispatcher servlet decides what the request is and which controller will handle the request. There may be many servlets. This particular request will be handled by what servlet? So accordingly, that mapping is done. Request and servlet mapping. This is done here. Handler mapping. So handler mapping maps the request with the servlet, so that that particular request is serviced by that particular servlet. So handler mapping is performed here. Accordingly, the request is redirected to the servlet. Servlets are part of the controller. The servlet deals with the request. Then if required, the servlet accesses the database, that is model. Then data are retrieved from the database by the servlet, then data are processed. So request processing is done using the data that are taken from the database. Database is represented by this segment model. So request is processed here, then after processing the request, then responses are generated, then responses are sent back again to the dispatcher servlet. Now dispatcher servlet receives the response, but response must be represented properly for presentation. That's why portlets are there in the Spring framework. Now the job of portlet starts. This is view resolver. So how the view will be presented? So after receiving responses by this dispatcher servlet, then it redirects the responses to the view resolver. View resolver presents the view, the response in proper format, in a presentable format, that is finally sent back to the client. So this is how the flow takes place in the Spring MVC framework.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So there is one flow where the view resolver will send the response in a presentable format. Can you explain what is that the response which is sent directly from the dispatch server to the external client? What is that one, sir? Which is from the dispatch servlet to the external
Uh,
source.
from the
From the dispatch server directly to the external site, there is a response is directly sent. What is that part, sir?
acha. Oh, dispatch one.
What is that one,
When
sir?
okay. When dispatcher servlet receives the request, when the servlet is capable of handling that request, when the servlet, dispatcher servlet is capable of handling that particular request, then that is processed there and redirected to the external, to the client.
So, which means the dispatcher servlet can also directly send it without using the view.
As it is a Java program, so the main function of dispatcher servlet is to resolve the request. For what purpose is request is, if the request maps with the servlet, existing servlets available with the controller, then it redirects the request to the controller. If the request coming from the client doesn't map with the existing servlets available with the controller, in that particular case, the request sent back to the client.
आम्ही घराकितला ते मॅप काढूंक जाय मॅपाचेर घालूंक जाय ती
Which means it cannot handle that request. So I'm
Yes,
sending
yes. When the web application
आता-
cannot handle the request, that can be redirected.
Okay, sir.
हय
So,
जी महादेव जी महादेव
somebody is talking.
हा ते तुमच्या हा तुमच्या ना ना
Some cross talking is coming.
हय हय जाण ते लास्ट कॉर्नर असतो पळय एंड असते
Who is talking?
लास्ट एंड खंय तरी गेलंय मग ते
Huh?
ते पळय
Ujjwal.
ना एंड
Somebody
असतो
is
ते
talking.
फर्स्ट एका एंड असतो फर्स्टूच आम्ही आज स्टार्ट पे केले
Mute your mic. Who
ना
is
बिल्डिंग
Ujjwal?
हा Owner.
He is not listening.
Yatin आहे ते. Yatin माझा classmate.
Can somebody tell him
ना.
to mute his mic?
ना. मरलकर. तो IAS officer.
Are you listening to me?
माझा बरोबर क्लासमेट. म्हणजे आम्ही 11-12 वांगडा गेलो. आणि तो वांगडाच बसला एका बेंचवर.
Hello.
Ujjwal, you're on unmute.
एक म्हणजे 4 फ्लॅट आहे त्या बिल्डिंगने.
There is a constant conversation going on.
आता नेमका तुझा नंबर मिळाला.
नंबर घालपाक जाय मला.
नंबर घालतात त्यांना एका सांगण्यात पूर्ण.
Can you please tell him? Ujjwal is a boy or
सगळे
girl?
आपले मरतो म्हणजे मग ती आयडी मिळेल काय झाली.
Ujjwala,
ना आता तुमचा तुझा नंबर.
can you mute yourself?
हो ना.
स्पीकर ऑन आहे. 1 मिनिट.
Not listening.
Okay. 1 second, sir. I'll just mute it. Hello,
Huh?
sir. 1 minute. I'm not getting this. माझं एक
Now it is muted. Now we shall come to the last part of today's session. Last part is MVC with bootstrap. You must be knowing what is CSS and what is the role of CSS in a web application. CSS is a style sheet. Basically, there are 3 components of a web page. The structure of the web page is designed using HTML. The basic structure, the skeleton, that is designed using HTML. CSS is added to the HTML so that the web page becomes more attractive and more presentable. So stylistic features can be added to the web page using CSS. So CSS makes the web page more stylistic and more attractive. This is number 2 component. HTML provides the basic structure. CSS makes the structure stylistic and attractive. Third component is scripting language. Any scripting language can be used for putting dynamism into the web page. To make the web page dynamic, to make the web page interactive, so that client can interact with the web page. That can be done by using a scripting language like JavaScript. So these are the three basic components of a web page. The skeleton is given by the HTML. The stylistic features are added by CSS, and to add dynamism to the web page, scripting language is used. That is what CSS is. Bootstrap is a framework. Bootstrap is a framework that is specifically meant for adding stylistic features to the web page. So you need not have to use CSS separately. If you have the Bootstrap framework, all CSS features are available with the Bootstrap framework. They are readily available. You need not have to bother how to use CSS because the Bootstrap framework provides all stylistic features. Simply you go deep into the framework and use the necessary features of your framework. What style you want to add. So Bootstrap is a free open source CSS framework that is meant for making the web page responsive. Responsive matlab a responsive web page. A responsive web page adjusts itself in all varieties of viewports. That is responsiveness. It adjusts itself in a mobile screen. It adjusts itself in a computer screen. It adjusts itself in a tablet screen. So Bootstrap helps in designing the web page in such a way that it becomes responsive. And Bootstrap concerns itself with front-end development only because it adds styles to the structure. So this is a framework that deals with the front end of your web application. It provides the ability to create responsive designs faster and easier in a easier way. Stylistic features can be added to the web page such as typographical style, stylistic in button, stylistic buttons, stylistic images, navigation, etc. Everything. All possible stylistic features can be added to your web page using Bootstrap framework. One example is given here, how CSS is used. As I told you, HTML is used for the basic structure of the web page and CSS is used to add stylistic instructions. One example is given. This example shows how a text is made green. What is the CSS instructions needed to make the text green? So P is the tag, the element is P. P is the paragraph element of HTML document. HTML document uses P element for paragraph. So P is the paragraph element, Style is the attribute of the paragraph element. Color green is the value of the attribute. So that the following paragraph will become green. Whatever will be there into the paragraph, whatever you write within the paragraph, that will appear as green. The simple CSS code that is given here as example. And this CSS is internal CSS. Internal CSS. Internal CSS is incorporated within the HTML page in the head section. That is internal CSS. And this example gives external CSS. External CSS, all stylistic features are described in a file, in a separate file. In this example, the file is custom.css. A separate CSS file with the name custom.css is created, and styles can be added to this file. Whatever style you want to implement in your web page, in your website, to maintain uniformity all over the website. Your website may contain hundreds of web pages. To maintain uniformity in all the web pages of your website, the stylistic features are added to a file, and that file is custom.css. This is a separate file containing all stylistic features. You can include that file in your HTML page document. How the file is included into the HTML document, that is given here. Link element. Using the link element, the custom.css file is included, so that whatever stylistic features are there into custom.css, all the stylistic features will be applicable to the entire website. So this is how custom CSS is applied. This is internal CSS. This is how internal CSS is applied. This is how external CSS is applied. But whether it is internal or external, everything is achieved using Bootstrap. Simply you learn to use Bootstrap, so that using Bootstrap framework, all types of CSS can be applied to your website. In the beginning of this session, I had given you some introduction about CRUD operation. CRUD stands for CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. These four are database operations. To deal with the database, these operations are performed. Necessity may arise to perform any of these operations or all of these operations. Using your web application, you can perform these operations with the database which is linked to your web application. Create matlab new information can be added to the database, that is create operation. Read matlab existing information can be retrieved from the database. Update matlab existing information can be edited, modified, that is update operation. And delete. Delete means simply removing the information from the database. So these are the four fundamental operations. They can be performed with the database. Which database? The database which is linked to your web application. And how to perform these operations? Database is somewhere else. You are the client. You are at the client side. You want to perform this operation on the database. Database is somewhere else at the server side. You have no direct access to the database. You are at the client side. Using the client, you want to perform these operations to the database, which is at the server side. So what to do? As a client, you must send request to the server that such and such operation is to be performed. As a client, you must send request to the server. I want to perform update operation. So request sending in this regard must be done. Then server receives your request. Yes, the client wants to perform update operation. After receiving your request, then the server establishes connectivity with the database which is at the back end. Then there comes into the picture, the JDBC comes into the picture. JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. After receiving your request for update operation, the server uses JDBC technology to establish connectivity with the database. Now database is linked to your web application, then update operation is performed. And response is generated, the data successfully updated, that response is sent back to the client. So for all operations, whether it is create operation or read or update or delete, the request must be sent to the server. So how request is sent? There is a mapping. There is a mapping. The second table. The second table shows the mapping, how request is to be sent to the server, not the first one. First one describes the operations. CRUD operation, first table, create, read, update and delete operation. But how to send the request to the server for the respective operations, that is demonstrated in the second table. For create operation, the request is sent using post method. There are various methods of sending requests. Client sends request to the server. How the request will be sent? There are various methods of sending requests. Post is a method. Get is a method. Put is a method. Delete is a method. This method is not similar to the Java methods. Java methods are different. They are the segment of codes. Java methods are code segments. These are not code segments. These are all methods of sending the request, the way of sending the request. So for create operation, the client needs to send the request using post method. For read operation, the client needs to send the request using get method. For update operation, client needs to send the request with put method. Finally, for delete operation, the client needs to send the request using delete method. Example is given. Post is the method of sending the request. HTTP. HTTP is the protocol. You might be knowing Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP. Protocol is the carrier. Transfer protocol, as the name suggests, The protocol is responsible for transferring your request to the server. That's why it is transfer protocol. So protocol is the carrier that carries your request from client to the server. It carries the request from client to the server. Post is the method of sending the request. HTTP is the carrier that carries your request. And teststudent.com, it is the server to whom the request will reach. Teststudent.com is the server to whom the request will reach. So post is the method of sending the request. HTTP is the carrier that carries your request. Teststudent.com is the server to whom the request arrives. And students is the database using which the operation will be performed. So this is how the CRUD operation takes place. So in this session, we discussed basically what are the frameworks available, J2EE frameworks, how they differ from each other, what are the features of each framework, and the stylistic features that can be applicable for your web application. So Struts framework, Spring Boot framework, Spring MVC framework, Hibernate framework, Bootstrap framework. So using all these frameworks, you can develop your web application. In the next session, we shall discuss the concluding part of this particular subject, of this particular paper. I think the next session is today at 4 o'clock. So
Yes, sir.
all of you are requested to join the concluding session, which will be held today at 4 o'clock.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually, we did not get any notification from the RC regarding the classes that are going on. We got informed via group and we received the link via group. So is
I cannot
that is
follow you.
valid?
What are you saying? Repeat, please repeat.
Sir, we did not get any official notification regarding the class. So I've got to know via group that the classes are going on. So I got late for joining the session. So is the recorded
Okay,
session available somewhere?
what official formalities are involved in this process? I am unaware of all those formalities. You
No,
can
sir.
ask your study center. You can contact your
Yes,
study center.
yes, sir. I've already mailed there. I'm just letting you know that I got late for joining the class because I did not receive any mail, any official notification. So
Okay.
is the missing? So I've missed some part, like the beginning of the class. So is the recorded session available somewhere?
The recording may be there with your administrator. They are dealing with this session. They may have the recording portion. They may have. I am not sure.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
As far as I am concerned, I am only conveying the things to you. All
Sir,
the
there is
administrative
I
job.
think there is a YouTube channel where these all the recorded session uploaded.
All the
Okay,
recorded sessions are not available
if
on the YouTube, it seems.
if that is available, then you can access that YouTube channel. For details, you are advised to contact your administrator. You are advised to contact
Maybe
your studies.
they will upload later, but I don't know about all about it.
Yes,
ठीक है.
because in the previous semester also all the sessions were not available. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
ठीक है. You freely discuss it with your center in charge, your study center in charge.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We shall meet again at 4 o'clock today for our
Thank you, sir.
concluding session. For our concluding session. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.